Today, let's welcome as our guest speaker, Sean Bacon from Dynamic Shift Consulting. Sean has leveraged his 12 years of experience in the Canadian Armed Forces to bring leadership lessons to help support high performance teams and leaders. And he's got a particular focus on the importance of mental toughness to deliver your mission. And actually, we at BC Tech have been working with Sean, both for our own business purpose and to help find ways to include Sean's teachings in our accelerator programs. So we can vouch firsthand for the value of his advice. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to just hand over to you now to give us just a little bit of an introduction to you and then give us some opening remarks before we move to the question and answer part.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for being here. My background's fairly simple. I served 12 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, 13 altogether in law enforcement. My specialty was training people for adversity to get themselves psychologically resilient, physically resilient, to make really good decisions in high levels of stress and crisis and continually be successful. Now, with that being said, it's, very often we're trying to define what mental toughness is. And I've kind of boiled it down to this one thing, and it's mental toughness is your availability to follow through when everything says you can't or shouldn't, and your ability to follow through and hit the needs, not your wants, but hit those needs of your mission that ultimately lead to your success. That's how I tend to look at it. And I can get deeper into this as we go on. Now, with that being said, I'm all ears.
Awesome. Okay, so let's kick off with just a few questions for me. So let's start with a bit of a definition, Sean. Okay, so thinking about mental toughness, what does that look like? How do you define it? How can you identify it if it's present or not present? What is mental toughness?
Well, like I alluded to in the very beginning, mental toughness is about those needs. Like, we tend to get lazy in our thinking. We love to gravitate to what we want. And that's not always convenient in a crisis. To do what we need to do takes a certain amount of grit. It takes a certain amount of determination, self-discipline even. I work with mental toughness with myself every day. I start with a mental check-in, see where I'm at emotionally, psychologically, physically. I figure out what I need to do and what are the possible friction points that are going to hold me back, and I attack those first. Your ability to stay the course when you get emotionally hijacked, or you get sidetracked, or you have someone that sidetracks you, and you don't always sidetrack yourself, and your ability to maintain the course despite everything in the world around you saying, just stop. So that's how I define that.
Awesome. Okay, so focus, perseverance, having a plan and sticking to it, grit. You'll give us some good advice on how. I know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But you have an analogy that you use that I really love, and that this challenging time, this COVID-19, this weird world that we're living in, is almost similar to a wartime. So what do you mean by that? Because, there's some angry rhetoric that's used around this, and I never think it's useful to think in terms of, anything too aggressive. But so what do you mean when you say it's like a war environment?
Well, a war is the ultimate crisis. Every time you've seen a war zone anywhere in the world, anytime throughout history, it is the apex crisis. Lives get lost. Land gets lost. Traditions get lost. There's a lot that can be lost in that particular style of crisis. So when I refer to wartime, it's more about the crisis and how we deal with that high level stress, how we deal with the emotionalism that comes from crisis, and more importantly, the leader you are now, the operator you are now, is not the same as a wartime person. In peacetime, and peacetime's a beautiful thing, by the way. Peacetime is what you strive for. And as a soldier, trust me, every soldier wants peace. However, peacetime is collaborative, it's participative, it's very easy. And we tend to get complacent in our thinking in peacetime. Wartime becomes about direction. It becomes about purpose. It becomes about making micro accomplishments in a mission and building on that. So when it comes to wartime, there is no greater crisis. So if you've got a wartime leadership mentality, your mind is already geared to building high performance teams, building high performance activity despite the crisis. See, a lot of people right now, one of the biggest things I deal with is like, how do I survive this? And now wartime leader is, how do I own it? See, if you're trying to survive the crisis, you become very siloed, very selfish in your thinking. You become very limited in your thinking. Whereas if you have ownership of the situation, you become very imaginative, adaptive. All of a sudden, the crisis gets leveraged into something brand new.
Super interesting, Sean. And as I'm listening to you and you're describing sort of war as the ultimate crisis, even just the words that you're using, loss, right? And survival, right? And grief. And I think that's part of it, right? As humans, we're hardwired to feel loss more than we appreciate gain, right? To take things for granted and to feel so that makes a lot of sense to me, that in this crisis, we're highly attuned to what's been taken from us.
Oh yeah.
What we've lost, what we don't have. And it's a really challenging situation. So what can we learn from leaders and from that sort of wartime analogy of how do you nonetheless stay focused on delivering your mission whilst feeling those emotions that come with loss, that come with fear, that come with anxiety, that come with stress? What are some techniques that we can use to keep ourselves on the right path?
Well, lately I've been really quoting 4 basic crisis leadership techniques that we used. And you know what? It's interesting leading in crisis. It's very addictive. Like your thinking level is very, very active, and the results are so critical that you need to make success. So we boiled it down to 4 basic principles. One is simplify. We as human beings love to complicate the crap out of things. And realistically, it's a lot like eating an elephant. And we've used this term over and over and over again. It's one bite at a time. Simplify. Great leaders are great simplifiers. Colin Powell said this. So regardless of the complexity of any given situation, you can break it down to bite-sized pieces of actionable execution. And there's the key word, is actionable. What is actionable? You can also do this in terms of the intelligence you're receiving, the information you're receiving. What is actionable? Second, motivate. Absolutely. In crisis, the differentiation between a manager and a leader is a manager moves things and a leader inspires and influences things. And your ability to motivate people to go beyond their limitations, go beyond their emotional hijacking, to go beyond their fear. And let's face it, in a crisis, the number one emotion, ladies and gentlemen, is fear. All the time, every time. So with that being said, your ability to motivate people, keep them very opportune, keep them very optimistic. Optimism is a force multiplier. The best high performance teams I've worked with and or trained had this insanely high level of esprit de corps, morale, motivation, their ability to own the impossible. It was infectious and actually a lot of fun. When you get a team that's got that quality, it's actually fun to go to work and see what they're going to do with it. Next is information. Right now, we're receiving too much of it. Matter of fact, we're receiving more op-eds, opinion pieces, than we are actually actionable information. So have a critical mindset on the information you're receiving, and also make sure that the information you're giving out to your people is actionable. Get the fear out of it, get the emotions out of it, and give them what they need to create action. Because action, even a bad action, is better than no action. Just going to leave that one lingering in your head for a moment. And the last is strength through composure. A great leader in a crisis is the eye of the storm, a pillar of strength. It doesn't mean you're not scared. It does not mean you're not frustrated. It does not mean you don't have fear. It means what you do in the face of it. Okay, that composure, a great example. I had a conversation this morning from a gentleman in England, and we referenced World War II and Churchill. Now, Churchill wasn't necessarily a great guy, and he wasn't necessarily a great politician, but he was an amazing person at maintaining a culture's composure when everything was getting destroyed, keeping people together, keeping them motivated. So your composure is going to be that psychological strength everyone else needs to keep going. The four things: simplicity, motivate, inform, composure.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Sean. I've captured those for myself, and we'll make sure we highlight those 4 points when we send it out afterwards. I was having a conversation yesterday, and I find this really resonates for the tech sector, and someone said to me, in a crisis, leadership is service leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership is asking, what can I do to help? And that's one of the things that I have been absolutely inspired by this tech community. I joke that I really struggle to get the tech community to tell me what their problems are so that I can go and advocate for what the tech sector needs, because they keep saying, forget about us, what can I do to help? How can I help small businesses and digitize, come online? How can we come together as a community? What can we do for frontline workers? I want to help. And it's been absolutely inspirational to realize again that that's the reality of the industry that we represent. And certainly it's the approach that BC Tech has taken. What can we usefully do right now to support tech companies of all sizes, but especially those that are small? And what can we do to help small businesses and Main Street businesses? Do you have any advice for the tech sector in particular when you think about mental toughness, when you think about these challenging times, anything that's very specific to us in tech?
Yeah, in terms of tech, leverage disruption. Look, tech industry, even in peacetime, and I'm just going to colloquially use the word peacetime, has always been inventive, has always been cutting edge, but now you need to be at a different level of cutting edge. You need to actually take the disruptions that we've been incurring and spin it, turn it around. I mean, just look at what we're doing now. I'm engaging clients all over the planet where before it was really mandated on who I could see face to face. So there's a lot of really cool, wonderful technology that's coming to the forefront because of the disruption. So get ahead of it. Don't be reactive to the disruption. Start forecasting the disruption, get ahead of it, own it, and then do something really tremendous with it. And that's us as as human beings. By our very natures, we are adaptive and inventive. But typically, it almost demands a situation such as this. Yeah. And we have to understand that, hey guys, that disruption's a gift, run with it. There's one that's sitting on each of your laps that you're not doing something with. Sorry about that. I cut you off there a bit.
That's all right. The one thing we know is that change is constant.
Right.
The one thing we know for sure is that whatever the world looks like today, it's not going to look like that in a year, in 10 years. Yeah. And we might not know what it's going to look like, but we can become adaptable. So we become good at adapting, and we can build skills that help us to be resilient and strong mentally, physically, and in our businesses. So when you think about Canada, would you think, I'm just curious about whether you think we were better placed or worse placed than other countries around the world. I'm noticing a question from Kathleen in the chat that says, peacetime's been here for a while. Canada's enjoyed good times for a while. I often say British Columbia was blessed with a 20-year economic boom and cursed with a 20-year economic boom, because if you're booming, why would you change? Why would you innovate? Do you think there's anything about this that's specific to BC or specific to Canada that's worth drawing out?
Well, there's 2 points here. In terms of Canadians, I mean, our history is laced with us really rising to the occasion. I mean, the United States tried to invade us once and we chased them back. People created communities in places they said communities could never be brought. So we have a pioneer society, but we haven't tapped into it in generations. And all of a sudden, along comes a spider called COVID-19, and along comes another spider called Black Lives Matter. Now there's racial riots, racial unrest. These things have been underlying the surface, but we've never had to look underneath the surface. Now the surface has brought itself to bear, and we have to choose a different path. So it's probably a blessing. It's actually a gift to us that this crisis has happened, and it's forcing us to evolve. The second point is this. I'm actually going to give credit to a country that's gotten it right, and it's not us. It's New Zealand. New Zealand has really risen to the occasion with a leader that is the only criticism that she has received is that she's under 40. Who cares? We're talking about true leadership with politics put to the side, making really good critical decisions that were inventive, that will put New Zealand way ahead when this journey reaches its ignominious end. Oh, and by the way, every crisis has a beginning and an end. This will not last forever, just so we're all clear. There will be an end. But what we do from this determines how we accelerate at our end. That's the thing Canadians are really good at. We as Canadians are really good at taking something miserable and turning it into something powerful. Terry Fox, prime example. Taking something horrible and turning the world up on its ear of how something different can be done. The 25-cent opinion.
That's awesome. So I'm just looking at some of the other points that we have here in the chat. So from Andrew Rose, sounds like taking the complexity of the crisis and turning it into its own resources instead of thinking about scarcity. So we start where we are and we assess the situation and we think about what's the right next step. What can I still do? What action can I take? I loved your point about actionable steps and actionable information. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually know Andrew from back in the day, and Andrew's one of the most critical thinkers I know. You know, what's funny, he's right. There's food that comes out of crises that doesn't come at any other time that allows us to make these really wonderful decisions that we just otherwise wouldn't see. So if we look at it from that perception, that perspective, we start to see the jewels in the sand. The problem, and I'm throwing this directly back at Andrew because he's been a longtime student of mine, and I love him like a brother. It's our cognitive bias. We got to start paying attention to the filters we're looking at these things with. Critical mindset has never been more important than now. See, we don't need to agree with each other. We don't need consensus in order to have collaboration. We need collaboration more so now, despite the lack of consensus, than ever before. And I think that's the one gift this crisis is offering us, is it's okay to have a differentiating set of beliefs, view sets, values, and solutions to come up with a new explosively powerful solution. Sorry, I just needed to throw that out there. Great question, Andrew.
That's awesome. So please, if anybody does have other questions, don't hesitate to raise them. Either raise your hand or raise them in the chat. I'm just going to go to another question that Kathleen asked earlier on. So what can employees do? We've heard from you what leaders can do. So I think that was super clear, your 4 points on what leaders can do. What can employees do to feel more empowered and to help businesses and society reach better conclusions at this time?
All right. In terms of employees, employees want to know where they fit. It's very deeply important for them to understand not only where they fit, but their importance in the mission. You'll hear me use military vernacular, but realistically, the mission is a successful end state of something. So your success is their success, and they know that they had a measure in it. So a phrase I used to love to use is, if nothing else happens but blank, we will be successful. This gives the employee to make decisions, boots on the ground decisions, in alignment with you. Take the leash off of them, tell them exactly where they're headed. This is what we got. This is our successful end state. This is what I need you to do. And now you make decisions to make it happen. Because in peacetime, they're very happy to be told, okay, this is what I got to do. This is how I got to do it. And they punch it. But this is like the perfect time, the absolutely perfect time to leverage your employees and the specialties they have. Matter of fact, one of the paramount principles of leadership is know your people, promote their welfare, and exploit their specialties, because their specialties are tied to their passions. And if you can leverage their passion, it directly has a consequential value to the end state of a mission. So get them understanding, if nothing else happens but this, we will be successful. Then let them go and they will do it.
That's awesome. And we've certainly been exploring that at BC Tech recently. You know, if nothing else happens but this at a BC Tech level, we will be successful. And then for each of my direct reports, if you succeed in nothing other than this, you will be successful and you will help us deploy our mission. And then our senior leaders are just at the stage now of talking to everyone else on the team to say, if you do nothing other than this, you will be successful and we will be successful. And of course, everybody has to do more than just one thing, but getting clarity about what the most important, most critical contribution you can make is just so valuable for people to then feel empowered. And as you say, bring their creativity and their ideas and their special skills to delivering on that. But it's even more essential than it ever was. Great. So Sean, I just have one final question that I want to kind of invite you to share your observations with us. Is there anything that has surprised you?
That's a great question. There's a lot. There's a lot that has surprised me. It's funny, crises, people really shine in a crisis or they really sink at a crisis. Like that you either rise to your highest level of character or you diminish to your lowest level of education or training. I think the thing that surprised me is the willingness people are having to rise. The other side of that coin, though, is I'm also surprised by how much fear is holding people back. There's a tremendous amount of fear, polarized fear on both sides of the equation. And that fear is holding everyone back. And I think right now, if we were to take the first thing, that ability to rise to our highest level of character, we're going to shine. We're going to shine very, very bright. But unless we get rid of that fear piece that I'm really surprised that we're submitting to as culturally, sociologically, we're going to hamper ourselves. We're going to hamstring ourselves and not be able to move forward. And that's, again, strictly my 25-cent opinion.
I love that, Sean. And I share your view on that. A motto I have for myself is feel the fear and do it anyway. We're all fearful. Everybody has that. We all worry. We're all anxious. Some of us do crazy things like I have and choose to adopt 2 small kittens at this time, which does officially make me best mom in the world, but also makes me a crazy person because I didn't really need 2 small kittens as well. But feel the fear, do it anyway, take a risk, get clear, get concrete. Let me just run through, simplify, break it down to what's actionable, motivate, inspire, remain optimistic. This crisis will end. We will come through this together. Provide information, but actionable information. Don't overwhelm people with information. And look for strength through demonstrating composure. Love that. Okay. Sean, you have been a gem as always. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your ideas. We really appreciate it. And with that, I would just ask, there's one thing I would really love it if people on the phone could do, and we're going to share the link afterwards in the email that we send out after this call. BC Tech does a number of programs, but the one that I'm most taken by is our Hyper Talent program, where we help K-12 students and educators understand what careers in technology are like. We demystify what it is, and we unlock the power of their own problem solving, their own creativity, to inspire them to consider a career in technology. We're working with the Vancouver School Board and with Arrow Lake School District in the interior, and we created a video of our experience in NACUSP with some absolutely astonishing students. So it'll take 3 minutes of your time, but if you could invest in watching that and sharing it through your social networks, I found it to be incredibly inspirational and a good reminder that great things happen in British Columbia. Thank you, everybody, and very much look forward to seeing you next week.